committee members. We are now into consideration for vote 84, Innovation Saskatchewan, subvote IS01. Minister Harrison is here with his officials. And if the officials could introduce themselves and state their position the first time they speak at the mic, that would be appreciated. And Hansel will turn the mic on for you. So, Minister, you can begin introducing your officials and with any opening remarks.
Sure. Well, thanks very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to committee members for being here this evening as well. We are pleased to be here for Estimates 2024-25 Innovation Saskatchewan. Officials Carrie Harvey, I think all know, Chief Executive Officer of Innovation Saskatchewan. On my right, Brent Sukanuk, our Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Services on the left. Avery Vold, our Vice President of Economic Development and Research Investments behind. Kelly Moore, Vice President, Research and Technology Park Operations behind as well. Danny Warwick, our Executive Director of Communications and Marketing, also behind us. Innovation Saskatchewan was established nearly 15 years ago as the central agency responsible for advancing the Government of Saskatchewan's innovation priorities. In 2022, the government introduced the Innovation Saskatchewan Amendment Act to create a single integrated innovation agency. The legislation moved the Innovation Place Research and Technology Parks under the authority and management of Innovation Saskatchewan. The changes allowed for the agency to enhance support for the province's innovation ecosystem with a robust portfolio unlike any other in the country. Innovation Saskatchewan continues to focus on its 4 strategic goals to ensure growth and success. Number 1, ensuring funded research institutes are creating economic impact and are aligned with Saskatchewan's research and development priorities. Number 2, building and supporting a sustainable and inclusive technology sector. Number 3, focusing resources into areas of strategic advantage and opportunity, such as ag tech and clean tech, to position Saskatchewan as a world-class innovation hub. And 4, making Saskatchewan the preferred destination for local, national, and international researchers, entrepreneurs, and tech companies. The agency has become an economic driver and unparalleled supporter of our innovation ecosystem, bolstering the province's reputation as a global innovation leader. This support ensures that great ideas can grow here. As the global innovation ecosystem continues to change, the agency has evolved with it. This fiscal year, Innovation Saskatchewan will receive a budget of $31.042 million, an 8.1% increase from the 23-24 budget. Its strategic priorities remain the same and involve attracting, retaining, and growing the province's technology sector and supporting the commercialization of game-changing research. Park operations will also continue to self-fund maintenance capital projects through its own source revenue. The budget includes 2 initiatives that will expand support for key innovation industries. The first is planning for the redevelopment of the flagship building at the Research and Technology Park in Saskatoon, aided by an additional $2.42 million in capital appropriation. The west wing of the Galleria building was home to a single tenant for over 30 years. Now there's an opportunity to harness the building's potential and activate it in alignment with our province's economic goals and sector priorities. This 44,000 square foot versatile space can house 5 to 8 scaling ag tech companies that will have access to specialized infrastructure, including multi-use occupancy, space, and laboratories. This redevelopment project addresses 2 key issues for ag startups: the lack of a specialized infrastructure available for smaller companies and the longer timelines required for ag startups to get product to market. This will give them access to high-demand space in a low-risk environment with connection to the flourishing agriculture community at the park. With this significant infrastructure investment, Innovation Saskatchewan will further the high-growth trajectory of ag tech companies, and the province will benefit from the positive economic impact. The parks in Regina and Saskatoon are epicenters of innovation, home to groundbreaking companies and surrounded by key research institutes like the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization. The parks have demonstrated their ability to support more economic diversification within our province. More than 200 technology companies have started their businesses at the park over the past 3 decades, and nearly 60% of them are still operating. The parks work in alignment with the agency's existing programs and investments to help de-risk research and development and support companies. For example, Lucent Biosciences received support from Canada's largest ag tech venture capital fund, Emertech, which Innovation Saskatchewan committed a $15 million anchor investment. The support helped Lucent Biosciences create a new $19 million manufacturing plant in Rosetown, which opened last October. It created 15 direct jobs and moved all production, previously done in BC, to Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute in Melfort, which will move into the Rosetown production facility upon its completion. As the Lucent Biosciences team sets up its manufacturing plant, it has also been expanding its footprint in the Saskatoon Research and Technology Park. Lucent Biosciences moved to Saskatchewan because of great partners, a friendly business environment, and the Emertech investment. It has stayed because of its superior infrastructure, flexible leasing, and a strong innovation ecosystem. The second key initiative in this fiscal year is the expansion of the Saskatchewan Technology Startup Incentive. Innovation Saskatchewan is doubling the annual tax credit cap from $3.5 million to $7 million and expanding eligibility to include clean tech companies. Launched in 2018, STSI provides a non-refundable 45% tax credit to individuals, corporations, and venture capital funds that invest in eligible startup companies. More than $90 million in private investment has been attracted to the province through the Saskatchewan Technology Startup Incentive. The province's investor pool has increased by 376 investors, 60% new to angel investment, and more than 400 jobs among 100 eligible startups have been created. The STSI enhancements were announced last month as a key part of Saskatchewan's new investment attraction strategy titled Securing the Next Decade of Growth. It is among the most aggressive angel investment tax incentives in the entire country. By expanding the cap and the eligibility, STSI is advancing Saskatchewan's competitive edge and incentivizing investment in Saskatchewan-based technology companies. STSI's inclusion of clean tech startup aligns with the province's commitment to sustainability and competitiveness within its resource sectors and is already positively impacting this sector. For example, Regina-based company Prairie Clean Energy has become a bioenergy leader in Saskatchewan's ag tech and clean tech sectors for its environmentally sustainable solution to agricultural waste. In fall 2022, Prairie Clean Energy received $180,000 in funding from Innovation Saskatchewan's Ag Tech Growth Fund, and now it's been approved for the STSI program as one of the first clean tech companies, with CEO Mark Cooper says has come at exactly the right time. These developments build upon the incredible success Innovation Saskatchewan's core programs have all had since its inception. The agency is allocating $1 million each to the Saskatchewan Advantage for Innovation Fund, or SAFE, and to the Ag Tech Growth Fund. These are dual research and development grant programs that accelerate the commercialization of game-changing technologies in agriculture, mining, energy, manufacturing, and healthcare, and help bring them to market. The initial investments by Innovation Saskatchewan have returned exponentially within our provincial economy as companies stay, grow, and build their technologies and collaborate with industry right here. Precision AI, a Regina-based company and international rising star in precision agriculture, received crucial early investments from the Ag Tech Growth Fund, which has led to exponential growth of the company and advancement in technologies that impact our agricultural industry. Innovation Saskatchewan is allocating $100,000 between the Made in Saskatchewan Technology Program, or MIST, and the Innovation Challenge, two programs that aim to address public sector challenges with local innovative solutions. And in this year, $2.89 million will continue to be allocated to the Innovation and Science Fund, which matches federal funding for research projects at Saskatchewan universities, colleges, and research institutes. Madam Chair, in addition to financial support programs, Innovation Saskatchewan will also continue to support the community, helping to build strong foundations in the province's innovation ecosystem with the following commitments. $375,000 to CoLabs, Saskatchewan's first technology incubator to continue fueling growth for Saskatchewan startups. CoLabs continues to build on its success. This year alone, it has created 120 jobs through startups in the program, $7.2 million in investments, and $19.4 million in combined revenue, beating last year's record of $13.2 million. Since its launch in 2017, CoLabs has incubated 201 startups who have produced 812 jobs and generated $60.7 million in revenue. Its stream of programming has provided crucial support to founders and been a game changer for the province. Innovation Saskatchewan has also committed $400,000 to the Technology Ecosystem Program, which supports programs and initiatives that advance tech sector growth. For example, through this program, Innovation Saskatchewan supports Startup TNT, an organization that connects angel investors with tech entrepreneurs to foster early-stage investments in the tech sector through its investment summits. With support from Innovation Saskatchewan, it's raised more than $3 million for 24 Saskatchewan startup companies. Innovation Saskatchewan also supports Cultivators AgTech Accelerator. This accelerator supports early-stage AgTech startups in Saskatchewan. With 2 cohorts completed, it's raised over $83 million in private capital across its 32 companies. Cohort 3 is now underway. And finally, Innovation Saskatchewan will also continue investing $3 million in Canada's largest AgTech venture capital fund, Emertech. This is part of the $15 million commitment announced in 2020 to invest $3 million per year over 5 years in the fund managed by Connexus Credit Union to ensure AgTech startups in Saskatchewan continue scaling and growing. Innovation Saskatchewan also plays a key role in supporting and advancing our research community by funding 6 of the major institutions that make up Saskatchewan's world-class research infrastructure. The agency will continue its core operational funding of $4.149 million to VITO. This funding, in addition to our previously announced $15 million, will support the establishment of Canada's Centre for Pandemic Research in Saskatoon. Construction began in February, and renovations are projected to be completed in the following year. The centre already includes a vaccine manufacturing facility which opened in June 2022. This manufacturing facility will soon be able to produce 40 million doses of human and animal vaccines per year. The centre will also include a new facility capable of housing a wider range of animals and will expand preclinical research and development capacity as well. With the level 4 containment capacity, VITO will become only the second laboratory after the Winnipeg lab capable of working with the most dangerous pathogens, an incredible feat for our province. These important enhancements will attract new talent, develop the next generation of scientists, and support researchers and make Saskatchewan a leader in vaccine research and development. Innovation Saskatchewan will allocate $2.5 million to the Sylvia Fedora Canadian Centre for Nuclear Innovation. The Fedora Centre operates the Saskatchewan cyclotron facility, and since 2016, it has had an incredible impact on the Saskatchewan population. 10 years ago, PET scanning for cancer diagnoses wasn't available in the province. In this past year alone, the Royal University Hospital has performed PET CT scans for clinical diagnoses of 3,240 patients, with isotopes delivered from the Saskatchewan cyclotron facility. This is a 20% increase over the previous fiscal year, where 2,691 patients received PET CT scans. In July 2023, the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories announced an agreement with the Fedora Centre to significantly increase the global supply of actinium-225, a rare medical isotope and groundbreaking weapon in the fight against cancer. At its Saskatchewan cyclotron facility, the Fedora Centre will play a critical role in the supply chain of this nuclear innovation, which will aid in the development of many promising new cancer treatments. Additional funding commitments include the following: $4.1 million for the Canadian Light Source, a major national science facility and home to the only synchrotron in Canada. Since 2005, CLS has enabled more than 5,000 scientists from 56 Canadian academic institutions and 45 countries to make groundbreaking discoveries and advancements in science. $1.675 million for the Petroleum Technology Research Center, which provides project management and funding support for research into enhanced oil recovery and carbon storage, including its Aquastore facility near Esteban. $256,000 for the industry-led International Minerals Innovation Institute to support digital mining transformation. And finally, $4.849 million for the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation, which allocates funding to high-impact and peer-reviewed health research relevant to the people of the province. By maintaining funding levels to research institutions, Innovation Saskatchewan is supporting world-class researchers, infrastructure and community, and advancing the province's research capacity, economy, and global competitiveness. In closing, in 2024-25, the agency will expand on its strong foundations to extend support for Saskatchewan's innovation ecosystem and continue to champion the Saskatchewan advantage as the province strives to be the best place to develop a technology company and undertake advanced research to solve global challenges. The government is proud Innovation Saskatchewan is leading this mission and of the work it has done to strengthen Saskatchewan's core sectors, as well as advance innovation opportunities in support of our growth plan. This concludes my opening remarks, and I look forward to questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Before I open the floor to questions, I just wanted to note change to committee members this evening. We have sitting in for Alina Young, Nora Berkey, and in for Jennifer Bowes is Ms. Betty Nippy Albright. All right, I'll open the floor to questions from committee members and recognize Ms. Nippy Albright.
Miigwech, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's always interesting to hear what's happening with Innovation Saskatchewan, and always nice, good to hear the wonderful things that are being done. But before I get into the questions, I just wanted to kind of address something that just happened just before we started the meeting, and I wasn't sure what the intent was behind the comment that was made about our chit sheets by the Madam Chair, stating that she wasn't sure if my colleague from Regina Coronation Park and I understood what the meaning was, what we understood the questions regarding the chit sheets. So I'm not sure what was implied, as we both are pretty good at English, understanding English. So I'm not sure what that was. I just wanted to enter that here on record just before the meeting started, whether that we understand what chit sheets are, and we have a good grasp of the English language. So I'm not sure what that was. So I just wanted to enter that, and so I'll start out with some questions.
Can I answer you, Ms. Nippy Albright? There was no implication made, nor gave us a sheet for someone that you gave the same sheet for. So that's why my comment is that we needed to get the right ones.
Right.
It wasn't that I was implying anything that you didn't understand. It's just that we had two sheets for the same person.
Yeah. No, what I heard was precisely, I don't think they understand. So that was fine. Anyway, we'll move on. But I just wanted to get back with the Innovation Saskatchewan here. It's always, like I said, interesting to hear the innovation that's happening here in Saskatchewan. Because of the time and the amount of time that we have, what I really would like to know more about is the exciting, what I think is exciting is the Saskatchewan Technology Fund, and how the mandate, of course, is developing policies and programs and conducting activities, et cetera. But I'm interested in more, hearing more about kind of is there a board for the agency, and who are the members on the board, and just the difference between the administration or the advisors. I wasn't quite sure on that, so if you could share with that. Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. It's a good question. It is. And it's I think you've hit on, it's a bit of a complicated answer. So really, the Ministry of the Environment kind of manage the policy end of the program. It's one where Innovation Saskatchewan really is the administrator, but we don't do the policy part of it. So I was going to ask maybe Carrie to expand a bit more on that, because it is a good question and it deserves a more fulsome answer. So go ahead, Carrie.
Hi, Carrie Harvey, CEO of Innovation Saskatchewan. Good evening. So yeah, as the minister mentioned, our role in relation to the technology fund is really just to help with the administration, sort of the back office work, the accounting. So we are running the intake. So I can give a little bit of an overview of sort of what's transpired to date. In September of this year, the call for expressions of interest was announced. From there, the invitations for full proposals were sent in February of 2024. We're really just going to be entering the review period for the proposals. And then decisions around, which projects will be selected will happen at a later date. So essentially, we ensure that that the proposals or the expressions of interest in the applications meet the criteria that's laid out, as well as ensure that there's some technical evaluation. But essentially all the policy decisions and sort of how the governance of the fund is managed would be the responsibility of the Ministry of Environment.
Thank you. I just want to jump right in and ask, because this is very interesting for me. But before that, I should have just kind of started a little rather than just going right in there. So the intent of this fund, again, remind me, I kind of named a little bit about it, but just kind of the intent of what's the intent of the fund?
So of the technology fund? So the intent of the technology fund, it's really a compliance option for what are considered heavy emitter organizations. And so as a way to meet their requirements in terms of GHG emissions, they have the option of contributing to the fund, which then those funds are pooled, and there's an application process for companies to essentially put together proposals to access that funding to incorporate innovations in their operations to help them to reduce their GHG emissions.
Good. I was like, okay, I was following the line. So thank you. You just confirmed what I was already thinking.
Yeah, and, no, good question. And really, just kind of by way of background, so environment really managed the policy end of it, but the reason why we are involved is because of the history and experience that we have in administering application-based programs. So whether that's the Advantage for Innovation Fund, there's a whole host of them. I referenced a number of them in my opening remarks, but that's really why Innovation Saskatchewan is the agency that does the administration, and really that is kind of our role in it. And it's because we have experience and expertise in doing the administration component for application-based programming.
So for the expression of interest that have already been submitted, the proposals from February 2024, so how many were submitted? Do you have an idea of how many?
Yes. So 20 expressions of interest were received.
And do those out of those proposals, do you have, you've talked about having a criteria of, is there a kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? A percentage that goes to different criteria funding streams?
So in terms of the expression of interest, it's really like the first cut really is about just, some fairly limited questions around, are they actually regulated emitter, yes or no? Like that's kind of the level of criteria that's used. Are they based in Saskatchewan, yes or no? Like that kind of thing. When we get to the full evaluation of the actual proposals, that's when there is a weighting. There is a weighting that's assigned to various criteria, but that's more of a policy-related question that environment would be responsible for working through with their advisory committee and their governance process.
So just with that, so help me understand how, Innovation Saskatchewan, how you work with the Ministry of Environment in relation to that. Follow up with that question.
So just to be, I guess, more specific in terms of what our role is. So we are responsible for basically managing the application process and intake periods. We do the initial screening of the applications, which I spoke to earlier in terms of that criteria. We would communicate with the applicants about the status of their expression of interest in their proposal. We'll administer any agreements with the successful applicants once those decisions are made, and we are responsible for general accounting of the fund, which includes invoicing and tracking of compliance payments. So that's essentially our role.
Good. So how many, I guess, what are the sources of funding that besides those that are the biggest emitters? Who else funds? Do you get the funds from?
Technology fund is completely funded through the heavy emitters putting in their compliance payments.
And the dollar, does it vary from year to year of how much is brought in?
Correct.
So was there an increase or decrease from last fiscal year to this year?
It just started last year,
Okay.
and there's an estimated $25 million available in the fund right now, but that is projected, or it could be projected to be much higher, just depending on, what the choices are of the companies in terms of that as an option.
Okay. So, so who makes the recommendations for the funding in relation to the, this fund?
Yeah, that's the advisory committee.
Okay.
Well, again, I think this is more of a governance question as well.
So the advisory, you make the recommendation, which goes to who? I'm just a little bit confused here. I know there's that relationship you have with the Ministry of Environment. So I'm like, who? Because you're not doing the policy piece. You're doing the administration piece. So at what point do you, I guess, sit down and chat about who does what when it gets gray?
Yeah, so, excuse me, so in terms of the decision-making process, that really is, again, that would be something that probably should be deferred to the Ministry of Environment. There is, what I would say is that there is processes in place and different levels of decision-making that will happen, but those decisions are all managed through the Ministry of Environment.
So just to help me understand, I get the kind of the complexity of kind of the roles of what you do, and then where, at what point, I guess, like, give me an example of what would be just a decision you make, and then what would go directly to the Ministry of Environment.
So the decisions that we would make would be around the expressions of interest. When the full proposals are completed, though at that point, when those are reviewed, those would go to the Ministry of Environment's, go through their decision-making processes. Yeah, they do have like various committees set up, and they would probably be in a better position to be able to explain sort of how those will play out in terms of those decision-making.
No, that's good. Good. Thank you for that. So, Minister, you spoke briefly, I thought I heard you say briefly about the Technical Review Committee. Can you, and how does Innovation of Saskatchewan relate to it? I believe you did say that, unless I read it here somewhere.
So we have, so essentially, the technical subcommittee is maybe a bit of a misnomer. The subcommittee is not, we actually have an agreement, or we're in the process of establishing an agreement with a third-party provider that will do the actual technical assessments, because we need to have individuals that have, engineering expertise that can do calculations around GHG emissions, those sorts of things. So that is that would be, and we are responsible for that, and we'll be responsible for that agreement and working with that third-party provider. So we haven't signed an agreement yet. We're just in the process of signing that agreement. And then once that technical agreement is completed, then that's when it would go to the decision-making group that the environment is responsible for.
Thank you. And also, so do you have a dollar figure that's allocated just for that? Or is that as, like, just in the budget? Is there that piece? Because I've read in here in trying to get a better understanding. I thought, okay, I know that you have dollars for experts that you need along the way. So how much of the budget is allocated for that expertise that you may need?
Yeah, so the way that the program is set out and the way that the act is written is that there's 5%, up to 5% of the fund value can be used for administration. But what I would say is that we are far beneath what that amount is. We have an MOU that basically outlines, what costs will be reimbursed, and that total amount, if you just give me 1 second, I'll just verify that. Will actually be based on what's actually utilized, but we're estimating about 280,000 in total is what would be required to conduct the technical reviews.
Okay. Well, thank you. So for the number of approved projects, it says it will be based on available funds. So looking at the, and I again, could be going and asking questions as it relates to environment, so correct me if I'm going there. So just with the dollars, the budget, so of the proposals that have been submitted, do you have an idea of what you would expect would be funded based on your budget?
Yeah, in terms of are you, sorry, just to clarify, are you looking for the total value, estimated total value of the projects that have been submitted versus what's available?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what we do know is the total value does exceed, the value of the projects does exceed the value of the fund at this point. I believe it's 55 million is the total, or 51 million is the total value of what's been requested in terms of the overall value of projects. And as I mentioned, there's 25 million in the fund right now.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to remember. I only have an hour. So just in the annual report for the fund for 2022-2023, there was a revenue of 29 million and no expenses reported. Could you provide the current revenue and expenses?
Yeah, so that would be a question for the Ministry of Environment to answer. That ministry is the one that actually collects the compliance payments. So they would be doing the processing, and what we know right now is no compliance payments have come in for this year, but they would be in a better position to be able to provide you with projections or even, you know, what their understanding is of what to expect for compliance payments for future payments.
I know you said that this was a relatively new fund. I think it started last year or something. You were saying that. So from last year, and I don't know if this is something I can ask, but I'll ask anyway. You can tell me if it's not. Okay, but could you provide a list of the projects that have been approved and rejected from last year?
The first intake period has just happened this year. Yeah, so there were no projects approved last year.
So is there like a projected time that you'll find out who's approved, or is that just with Ministry of Environment? They would.
In terms of the time frame at this point, we're expecting sometime in the fall is when decisions will be made around the project funding.
Okay, so so in 2023, the price for emissions was set at 65 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, a $15 per ton increase over 2022. What is the current rate, and who and how is this rate determined?
Yeah, that's a question for Ministry of Environment. They're the ones that would do those calculations, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. We talked about the, I wasn't sure, I may have missed the makeup of the committee or this group that, with the, this fund. Remind me again who is on the committee?
So the Ministry of Environment has set up an industry advisory committee that has been working with the ministry and ourselves over the course of development of the fund. The scope, the criteria, all of that has been worked on with the industry members.
So remind me again, I read, I believe it's in the document, that you had two members from industry. Is that correct?
No, there's, on the advisory committee?
That's on the advisory, okay.
Yeah, no, there would be, I'm not sure what, but there's more than 2 members. What's the size of the advisory? Yeah, so about seven members or so, but they're all industry representatives. With Ministry of Environment is really the one managing the advisory committee.
So just kind of take it kind of totally in a different area, and just for my own interest, I know that Indigenous people like to be involved in the economic reconciliation. So have you, and is there ever an interest, I guess, to ensure that Indigenous, whether it's elders, knowledge keepers, would they be engaged, or is there an intent to engage them down the road as an advisory or part of the committees?
That, again, would be the Ministry of Environment that question would be best posed to, because they're the ones responsible for setting up the governance, bringing on, those or establishing criteria, leading those discussions with industry members.
So just kind of back to this particular fund that I've just been talking about here. So in this, there's, so what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is all that Innovation Saskatchewan has no say in the makeup that the makeup of the board or committee. It's Ministry of Environment, is that what you're saying? Okay, so is there a desire or an intention for innovation to advise or recommend that engagement of knowledge keepers be part of the makeup of the organization? Is that something that you guys would be thinking of going down?
Yeah, we can certainly bring that. I think it's a really good point, and I think that that's something we can bring back as part of our discussions with Ministry of Environment officials and the advisory committee as well.
Okay, so this fund, again, Liza, when I was reading, this is for the output. This fund is for the output-based performance standards, right, and not the other piece, which is environment. Is that correct?
The output-based performance standards, that is environment. Yeah, they're responsible for that.
I just went ahead of myself here. So here, I was just reading here, the funds obtain funding from two principal sources. Of course, is the compliance payments from regulated emitters. Right, and then the second one is the penalty payments, which is entirely with the Ministry of Environment. So this piece that you're talking about is the OBPS program.
Correct.
Is that correct?
The other stream that you're speaking to, the penalty payments, that's actually Ministry of Energy and Resources.
You're right. You're right. I didn't. Yeah, it's down here. Okay, so. In terms of economic reconciliation and innovation, Saskatchewan, is there a plan of moving forward and inviting inherent and treaty rights stakeholders in being part of Innovation Saskatchewan?
So what I could say about that is, I think that, we really do see the importance of ensuring that our Indigenous communities are included in part of the technology sector. I mean, from a perspective of, I guess, percentage of participation in the workforce currently, what we see nationally is that Indigenous people make up only 2% of the technology sector. In Saskatchewan, it's a little bit higher at 7% in Saskatchewan, but we know that's still not, where it needs to be. It is like, it's definitely a complex issue in terms of how do we best encourage participation and engagement in this sector, and it really starts downstream from an education, from the education of youth, encouraging and creating excitement around STEM and science and technology. And so really our role, what we have, and just to add to that, it's not Innovation Saskatchewan's sole responsibility. There's a number of other partners and groups that would, have a role in helping to ensure that we have better results in terms of participation. So what we tend to do is look at that ecosystem development. We have a fund, I think the minister would have mentioned in his remarks, called our Ecosystem Development Fund, and we target initiatives that will help to advance certain priorities in that space. And so we've tended to really focus on events or initiatives that will support youth and expose youth to STEM. So we have, for example, we funded I think we talked about this last year, the RoboWax program, which we think was extremely successful because not only from the time when we supported that program, where it where what we saw happen was that the organization that's delivering the program, which is the Saskatchewan Industry Education Council, they were able to secure federal funding through CanCode to expand the program even further. And they have been actually quite successful in even further expanding that program to now include an MOU with FSIN to ensure that the 74 First Nations have access to these robotic kits. And some of the stats to date are that SIEC has trained 3,425 teachers. They've impacted over 66,000 students and 10,000 Indigenous students. And so we're seeing some really good results from that program. And we also have provided direct funding to STEM summer camps, where we provided $42,000 for Educating Youth in Engineering and Science program, which was a week-long STEM program. And so from Innovation Saskatchewan's perspective, that's where we've really been focusing our efforts in really trying to create that downstream development and excitement around and the opportunities that the tech sector offers. It's, some of the highest paying jobs are in the tech sector. I think it's, over 75,000 is the average income for jobs in the technology sector, but even more than that, the opportunity for entrepreneurship and developing, startup companies. So that's really where we focused. But some of our funded institutes as well are also looking at ways to engage Indigenous communities in their programs as well.
Well, thank you. I actually had a friend of mine who's a teacher who taught one of those robotics courses to the to the students. So that was, so when he was telling me about it, I was like, hey, this is innovation. So it's been good. So I'm just cognizant of the time here, and I'm sure I have one question. So my question, this final question is going to be around the 94 calls to action. We know that it's been since the 94 calls to action and the Truth and Reconciliation Committee made the 94 calls to action, the onus has been on businesses, organizations, governments, all levels of governments to look at incorporating relevant 94 calls to action. So with Innovation in Saskatchewan, where, if any, of the 94 calls to action do you see Innovation Saskatchewan embracing and also implementing?
Yeah, maybe I appreciate the question. I really, really do. And so I'll maybe start with a bit of a high-level statement. Again, cognizant, I know we only have a few minutes left. I appreciate the questions overall, though. We've had a chance to talk about it a little bit in some of the other estimates that we've done, but really, we are committed to finding ways within, whether it be Innovation Saskatchewan, whether it be through Saskatchewan Research Council, whether it be through Trade and Export, Immigration, Career Training, other ministries across government. I can't speak for all of the other, but I know from where I sit and have the honor of being responsible for, we really, from the very top through our entire senior management team, are looking for every opportunity that we can find to work with First Nation, whether it be First Nation governments, with First Nation companies, with tribal organizations as far as companies, if they're community development corps, to find ways that we can partner and find ways that we can really, in a meaningful way, create opportunity for Indigenous people. And you know, the calls to action, I would say, you know, they're obviously much more specific than that sort of broad statement, but I think really what they add up to is a statement as far as economic reconciliation that kind of gets to that point. So that's something that really goes to the heart of what we try and do, and that's true for Innovation Saskatchewan as it is across the other departments that I have the honor of being responsible for. So I'm not sure, Kara, if you want to add any, but feel free.
The only thing that I would add to that is as I mentioned, I mean, we also, with all of our funded institutes, by extension, we do have those discussions at board level around how do we ensure that that we are looking at those calls to action and ensuring that we have initiatives that advance, you know, our efforts in that area. But I would also just mention that the other thing that we are doing is, just as an organization, ensuring that our own staff understand what the calls to action are. It's a part of our training, our mandatory training when we have new staff come on board. And so just by creating that understanding so that there's that lens that we are all looking through as we do our work, you know, in the organization.
Having reached our agreed-upon time for consideration of these estimates, we will now adjourn consideration of the estimates for Innovation Saskatchewan. And Minister, if you have some closing remarks you'd like to make.
Just very briefly, thank you very much for the questions, good questions, and good discussion, and want to thank as well through our senior leadership team here, thank you to all of you, but through you to our entire team at Innovation Saskatchewan for the work you do every day. Appreciate it.
Snippy Albright, if you have some closing remarks you'd like to make.
I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to answer my questions, and it's always so interesting to hear about what Innovation Saskatchewan is doing, and in particular for our young people out in the community. So thank you again for taking your time to answer my questions. Thank you.
All right, we'll just take a brief recess to change officials and committee members if need be. All right, welcome back, committee members and Minister. Next on our agenda this evening is consideration of the estimates of the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training. We will now consider Vote 89, Immigration and Career Training, Central Management and Services, Sub-Vote IC01. Minister Harrison, if you want to introduce the officials that have joined you here, and I ask that first-time officials speak at the mic. They say their name and their position as well, and Hansard will turn on the mics for you. So, Minister, begin with your introductions and your opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. And again, thanks to members of the committee for being here this evening. It's appreciated, and look forward to the discussion. And I am pleased to be here today to discuss the priorities and investments the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training is advancing in this budget year 2024-25. To my right, Deputy Minister Rochelle Bourgoin. I think everybody knows Rochelle from previous appearances before committee. Assistant Deputy Minister behind me, Darcy Smisniak. Assistant Deputy Minister Krista Ross. To my left, and three of our executive directors, Regan Ops, Jennifer Clark, and Ann McCrory, who are joining us as well. The ministry's mandate is to build a strong and resilient labor market by addressing employer workforce needs, training people for jobs, and supporting newcomers to work and stay in Saskatchewan. In 2024-25, we're achieving this by making a series of strategic and innovative investments in programs and services that build and develop Saskatchewan's labor force. This year's budget features $160.54 million in total expenditure. A strong workforce is the foundation of the economy. Last year, capital investment in Saskatchewan increased by more than 25% to $17 billion. This investment is growing our industries and creating thousands of jobs. Recently released data from Statistics Canada shows that in the final quarter of 2023, Saskatchewan had the highest job vacancy rate amongst the provinces, with 21,800 job vacancies. Saskatchewan needs to ensure we have the labor force to meet this demand, or we risk limiting and capping our growth. We're already seeing the impact of our efforts. Saskatchewan's labor force is growing. The latest labor force statistics released earlier this month showed the province added 10,500 full-time jobs in March 2024 over March 2023. And with an unemployment rate that is consistently well below the national average, Saskatchewan continues to demonstrate our economic strength. In March 2024, Saskatchewan's labor force also set several record highs for the month, including for labor force, employment, and female and male employment. This growth is exactly what Immigration and Career Training, or ICT, is supporting with this year's budget. In 2024-25, the ministry will invest in programs that are not only designed to meet Saskatchewan's current labor force needs, but our future needs as well. We know Saskatchewan has a bright future, and our government is looking ahead to ensure the province's workforce is prepared to meet the evolving needs of industry. Because as our economy grows, we want to make sure it translates to an excellent quality of life for Saskatchewan people. In addition to supporting Saskatchewan's growth plan goals of adding 100,000 jobs and growing the population to 1.4 million by 2030, ICT's 2024-25 budget also supports the recently released Saskatchewan labor market strategy. This strategy is a roadmap to ensuring Saskatchewan is able to meet the demands of our economy. The strategy directly supports the province's investment attraction strategy, which outlines how the province is increasing investment and further advancing Saskatchewan's growth plan goal of $16 billion in private capital investment annually. This investment drives Saskatchewan's growth, creating jobs and growing our economy, and creating a better quality of life for Saskatchewan people. However, for Saskatchewan to attract private investment, we need to have the labor force to support that growth, which is why the labor market strategy is critical to that endeavor. The labor market strategy has 3 pillars: connecting Saskatchewan people to jobs, recognizing skills in Saskatchewan, and international recruitment. Connecting people to jobs means giving Saskatchewan the people the first opportunity to benefit from our growing economy. To do that, we need to ensure they have the skills and knowledge employers need. In 2024-25, the budget includes several investments for skills training programs and services for unemployed and underemployed people, including $24 million for adult essential skills training, which provides the foundational skills that are needed to enter the workforce, such as literacy, numeracy, and workplace readiness skills. This training provides an essential foot in the door, enabling people to take their first step into employment. $23 million for pre-employment programs and services, which provide learners with the basic skills and knowledge they need to begin applying for jobs, enabling people to overcome some of the initial barriers to employment. Nearly $22 million for credentialed skills training programs delivered through post-secondary institutions, which prepare people for jobs in fields such as construction, healthcare, energy and manufacturing, tourism and agriculture, and many more. Through these programs, people are able to directly enter into in-demand jobs in sectors across the province. And lastly, the 2024-25 budget includes nearly $10 million to support employment programming for people with disabilities, which ensures our labor force is inclusive, that we're providing all Saskatchewan people with the opportunities they need to find meaningful employment. The labor market strategy outlines how the province is investing in programs that address in-demand occupations. As the province continues to grow, the demand for workers in the construction skilled trades is on the rise. From carpenters to electricians to plumbers to welders, jobs in this sector are building the infrastructure the province needs to support continued growth. To support the increased demand for skilled trades, the province is increasing our investment into the Saskatchewan Apprenticeship and Trade Certification Commission, or SATCC, by $1.5 million to add 250 apprentice training seats for construction-related trades, including electrician, plumbing, and welding. This brings the total investment in apprenticeship training to nearly $23 million and will increase the total number of training seats to 4,850. This year's budget also includes programming specifically aimed at Indigenous people and those living in Saskatchewan's north to connect to jobs in their own communities. Northern Saskatchewan is rich in natural resources and economic potential. The ministry is working in partnership with employers, training institutions, and First Nations and Métis agencies to ensure Northerners have the opportunity to get the skills and access the training they need to work in these important industries. For example, this year, the province is providing $400,000 to the First Nations Natural Resource Centre of Excellence to further develop the Indigenous workforce in the natural resource industry. Partnerships with organizations like the First Nations Natural Resource Centre of Excellence, with the first-hand knowledge of both the industry and Indigenous communities in Saskatchewan, enable the ministry to maximize our investments and grow the workforce Saskatchewan needs while also ensuring it is inclusive of everyone. The second pillar of the labor market strategy is recognizing skills that are already in Saskatchewan. Every year, through the Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program and other newcomer pathways, people come to this province with skills, knowledge, and credentials to contribute to our economy. But many face challenges in getting those credentials recognized, stopping them from working in the field in which they have been trained. It's unacceptable to have internationally trained healthcare workers, tradespeople, engineers, other professionals unable to work in their profession, which is why in 2024-25, Immigration and Career Training is investing more than $850,000 to fully implement the Saskatchewan Credential Recognition Service to support individuals with out-of-province or international credentials cut through the red tape and get to work. We're offering one-on-one support to people and helping them navigate licensure pathways. Through this service, the province will also be working proactively with regulatory bodies to streamline pathways for credential recognition in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has one of the most aggressive credential recognition services in Canada. Frankly, I think it's the only credential recognition service in Canada. Putting in place strict timelines for regulatory bodies to respond to credential recognition applications, and by investing further into this service, we're making working in Saskatchewan even more appealing and accessible. The final pillar of the labour market strategy is international recruitment. When employers are no longer able to find the labour force they need in Saskatchewan, the province is supporting them to look beyond our province and find the talent they need. This year's budget includes an additional $856,000 to support the growing Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program, or SINP. These additional funds will support the processing of 7,250 nominations in 2024, which will bring in more than 18,000 newcomers to Saskatchewan between nominees and their families. Immigration plays an important role in our economy, and it's imperative that our immigration program protects newcomers and employers. In addition to supporting SIMP applications, this funding will also enable the ministry to further enhance program integrity measures that protect the SIMP, protect employers, and protect newcomers from fraud and exploitation, and ensure that Saskatchewan remains a top choice for international candidates looking to live and work in Canada. As we continue to advocate for more growth and autonomy over immigration, the ministry is also focused on supporting employers as they look outside of Saskatchewan to find the workforce that they need. Recruitment missions, both across Canada and abroad, help employers hire skilled workers when all other avenues for sourcing local talent have been exhausted. In the last year, the ministry hosted job fairs in the spring of 2023 in Regina and Yorkton, and supported job fairs across the province. This spring, a delegation of officials and employers participated in job fairs in Toronto and Calgary, with another planned for Vancouver in June. International employer-led recruitment missions were held in Warsaw, Poland this past September, focused on Ukrainian refugees, followed by Manila, Philippines in December. The ministry leads employer-driven recruitment missions in partnership with Saskatchewan's network of international trade offices. All of these missions have led to employers finding the workforce that they need. As a result of our most recent international recruitment initiative in Manila, more than 1,000 nominations are expected through the SINP. This is proof that we're doing things right, employers are finding the workforce they need, and we're enabling growth for Saskatchewan's economy. Another way we're supporting the labour market strategy's focus on international recruitment is through the introduction of new legislation that strengthens the province's ability to maximize the capacity of the immigration system here in Saskatchewan. The new Immigration Services Act, which is before the House at second reading right now, introduced earlier this month, provides the province enhanced authority to investigate and deter immigration fraud, provides stronger protections for foreign workers, and enhances our ability to provide settlement programming for newcomers. In addition, the new act will also repeal and replace the Foreign Worker Recruitment and Immigration Services Act. This will bring all authorities related to immigration in Saskatchewan under one piece of legislation. The Act also furthers Saskatchewan's efforts to secure more autonomy over immigration. This means Saskatchewan will have the most aggressive foreign worker protection legislation in Canada and the most robust integrity framework in the nation. We believe Saskatchewan is the best position to choose newcomers that will support economic growth in the province. Through relationships with our stakeholders and our understanding of Saskatchewan's regional labour market needs, we're the ones who understand what gaps Saskatchewan needs to fill in our labour market, not the federal government. In 2022, we proposed the Saskatchewan Immigration Accord, a modernized agreement with the federal government, which would provide Saskatchewan more autonomy over immigration. And while we're pleased, the SIMP has grown since 2022, we are committed to further pursuing other elements of that immigration accord, although I think we've made very significant progress on very large parts of it. A strengthened immigration program and increased autonomy will enable the province to better attract and retain the international workforce we need to support our growing economy. The labor market strategy also looks to the future, where the evolving needs of industry and our growing population will impact our labor force. One of these critical sectors is healthcare. The 2024-25 budget includes funding to support the Health Human Resource Action Plan by investing $4.1 million for training and settlement supports for in-demand healthcare occupations. The Health Human Resources Action Plan, or HHR plan, outlines a 4-point plan to recruit, train, incentivize, and retain healthcare providers and steadily grow Saskatchewan's healthcare workforce. The 2024-25 budget furthers this important strategy by investing $2.3 million to support training seats for continuing care aides, licensed practical nurses, and medical lab assistants. These positions all play important supporting roles in our healthcare system and ensure Saskatchewan people receive the care that they need. Growing the province's capacity to train for these occupations will ensure our workforce is able to keep up with growing demand. ICT's investment into HHR priorities also includes $1.8 million in credential recognition supports. These supports include settlement programming such as language assessments, training, and exam fees. As I've said, recognizing credentials in the province is critical for Saskatchewan's labor force to meet the demands of our employers. This is especially true in the healthcare sector. We've heard too many stories about medical professionals trained elsewhere in Canada or abroad who aren't working in their fields because they can't get their credentials recognized. Often, we'll hear two reasons. It will either take too long or take the required courses to get licensed, or the process is too expensive. This investment will help address both scenarios to ensure more healthcare workers already living here or planning to move here are able to work in the fields in which they have been trained. Streamlined and accelerated assessments, training and licensure pathways, as well as settlement programming for internationally trained healthcare workers are all supported through this targeted HHR support. In addition to the highlights I've already noted, ICT's budget continues to support core programming and services that ensure Saskatchewan employers are able to train, recruit, and retain the skilled workforce that they need to support investment and economic growth. To do so, the ministry offers a suite of programming for both employers and job seekers. Through our Sask Jobs lines of service, underemployed or unemployed people can access support from career development experts either online, on the phone, or in person at 10 Sask Jobs offices across the province. There, people can get support with job searching, job matching, career planning, and of course, get connected to our program delivery partners across Saskatchewan. Sask Job services also include supports for employers, from helping employers determine workforce needs to labor market information, to connecting them to funding to support training. Sask Jobs is available to help enable employers to find and develop the skilled workforce they need. The number one barrier to growth identified by employers in Saskatchewan is the lack of an available labor force. By investing in programs that support the Saskatchewan labor market strategy, ICT is ensuring we have a workforce that will help us realize our full potential. Guided by the strategy's 3 pillars, connecting people to jobs, recognizing skills, and international recruitment, ICT's 2024-25 investments are creating a labor force that supports the province now and into the future. We're seeing record investment, more jobs, and more opportunities. ICT's 2024-25 investments ensure that all Saskatchewan people can benefit from the opportunities provided by our growing economy, ensuring this province is the best place to live, work, and build a life. And with that, I would say thank you and look forward to questions.
Thank you, Minister. I'll open the floor to questions now from committee members. And I'll recognize Mr. Berkey.
Okay.
Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister, for your detailed presentation and giving us an overview. Thank you for the hard work that you've been sitting since what time, I don't know. But it's an incredible job you're doing. And, well, it's hard. And thank you, Deputy Minister. I'm really very pleased that in immigration, when I was getting any kind of cases or frustration among people for their delay, thank you for all the help that you guys provided us. thank you, all the executive directors for all the hard work that you guys are doing, and it's amazing, and really appreciate that for preparing for today's committee meeting. Thank you, my colleague on this side, MLAs. Thank you, my colleague Patty over here to support me. It's my first meeting over here in the committee. Might be all a little bit nervous, but I will drink water after each and every 5 minutes. So, and thanks to the Legislative Assembly staff over here as well. Thank you for all the support, for all the help that you guys been doing us. Thank you. Okay, so I believe this ministry or your ministry is responsible for labor market planning. Can you please provide me a quick summary of the labor market needs currently and for the next number of years?
So I'll maybe ask Darcy to go through maybe a bit of a detailed summation and maybe talk about some of the process for how we work with our partners and work with some of the data gathering organizations on making labor market projections, which really do inform how we do a lot of the investments for job training, whether that be through Apprenticeship Commission, whether that be through our Polytechnic, how we actually allocate that. So I'll maybe give a bit of a high-level summary around a bit of that, and then turn it over to Darcy. But it's a very good question. It's a very good question because it's an important one. We put a lot of work into making sure that the investment that is made is going to reflect the labor force that we need right now, but also the labor force that we're going to need in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, because really, given the lead time on some of the training programs that we have in place, that is how far out you have to project when you're making investments, including in this budget. So that really means that you have to have a very good understanding as to what sort of jobs are going to be required given investments that are being made right now. So BHP, for example, obviously making one of the largest investments in the history of the country. I think it's the second largest investment in the history of Canada, largest investment in the history of their company. Obviously, they're going to need hundreds of employees that are going to be prepared to work in jobs to actually have a 8.5 million ton mine operational over the course of the next number of years. And they're going to need these employees that are prepared to step into those roles, and not just BHP. So you add that up with Mosaic and Nutrien and some of the other potash companies and layer that on top of the other investments into the mining sector. It means that at the end of the day, right now, we need to be funding more seats in the skilled trades. We're going to need more electricians. We're going to be needing more mechanics. We're going to be, so that is really was the catalyst, even for an additional in-year investment that we made into the Apprenticeship and Training Certification Commission to add seats. And we had a multi-year plan to add additional seats through our Apprenticeship and Training Certification Commission. We announced additional seats as a part of this budget. There were additional seats last budget, and the in-year addition of seats as well. And that all really is based on labor market assessments from our partners, using data as well from organizations like StatsCan. But really, we try and work with our employers so we have a very clear understanding of exactly how many positions they're going to need for certain jobs. And they have a very clear idea as to what their future labor force needs are going to be. So we do that work. We bring that together, and that really is a big part of how we determine funding envelopes for post-secondary institutions, SATCC, and other mechanisms by which we deliver labor market training or programming, including from adult basic to more high-end sort of training. So I'll maybe leave it there, but Darcy can talk about, this is a really interesting area, and I really commend the work the ministry does on this, because it's not always easy. There is an art to it as much as there is a science, but over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Minister. Darcy Smisnick, Assistant Deputy Minister. So maybe just to add a little bit of detail to the Minister's comments. When we look at labor market planning, we're looking at this from a number of sources, both internal and external. So we will rely on data sources from Stats Canada. There's a number of different sources. Labor Force Survey is one of the key ones that we do that comes out on a monthly basis. the survey of employment and payroll hours, employment insurance statistics, job vacancy and wage survey reports. We also look at local and sector level intelligence gathering that we do directly with industry associations around the province. The Sask Chamber, Economic Development Regina, the chambers in Saskatoon and around the province are a big part of the information that we receive and return to them in terms of some of the analysis that we do. There's internal data sources. Our saskjobs.ca function is a significant source of data for us in terms of doing some analysis around what the labor market is performing at in terms of job vacancies and by sector and by industry. We'll look at other surveys that Stats Canada does with respect to survey on business conditions and the CFIB reports with respect to their analysis. We produce a 5-year labor demand forecast on future trends as well, which I'll speak to in a second. And then information from the post-secondary system as well as a significant source of input into our understanding of the program response to some of the labor market trends that we're seeing. On the construction side, Build Force is another significant input into some of the work we do around planning for the construction trades workforce and the investments we intend to make through apprenticeship and other skills training programs. One of the important indicators that we track with respect to the labor market is a labor market tightness indicator. And that is really a definition of low unemployment and high demand. That ratio in Saskatchewan has been hovering around 1-to-1 for about 24 or 26 months now. Historically in Saskatchewan, that ratio is around 3.4 unemployed persons for every vacancy. So that gives a bit of an indication of exactly how tight the labor market is. The labor force survey that's released on the first Friday of every month is demonstrating sort of record numbers with respect to employment and labor market participation across the piece at sort of the aggregate levels, but also for males and females and for off-reserve Indigenous folks in the labor market currently. Some of the other things that we're seeing with respect to the labor market is a bit of a change or a shift in terms of the context of the labor market. We're seeing differential impacts by certain sectors. Some of them are evolving due to innovation. Some of these trends that we identify were underway pre-pandemic, and they're being accelerated in terms of the opportunity for digitization and automation. And that's being, some of the sectors that I'd say historically have not been impacted. Manufacturing and our energy sectors have been very quick adopters of the technologies, but we're seeing some of that impact in some of our other sectors now, like hospitality. Demographic shifts in the province are also significant contributors to some of the work we do around labor market planning. There's no question that we're seeing the boomers finally starting to leave the labor market, and we're projecting that the last of the baby boomer generation is going to actually exit out at 65 years of age in 2031. So we're going to see that accelerate for a little while yet. We've also seen other folks who are leaving the labor market, making different choices, accelerated pace of exits and those kind of things. But on the positive side of things, like I said earlier, we have an off-reserve Indigenous population that's at employment record levels here in the province currently. So demographics, geographic location of the workforce is also something that we look at with respect to, are there available workers where the jobs are and where the investments are being made? Are they in the occupations and industries that we need to hire? And do we have the right skills in that workforce? And I think the final point I would make just is around competition for talent. And that's something we're monitoring. We're seeing competition not only within sectors, but across sectors now within the province. And then competition for the same talent nationally and internationally. So it is really global competition for talent. The Labor Market Outlook document that I referenced forecasts a total of 136,000 job openings over the 5-year period from 2022 to 2026. Of those, about 63,000 of those opportunities are due to economic growth or expansion and demand in the province, 73,000 due to retirements or replacement of the workforce. All major industries in Saskatchewan are expected to have a net increase in job openings over that forecast period, with largest gains being expected in the agriculture and forestry sectors, healthcare, social assistance, education, retail, trade, and construction.
Thank you, Minister and Deputy Minister, Assistant Deputy Minister, for stepping into the long-term and short-term estimation. It's great, amazing. My next question will be running into your government claim that unemployment rates are low, but there are thousands of people still receiving SIS. That doesn't include the number of the people receiving income support that live on reserve. What are you doing to get those folks into the workforce so they can contribute into the labor market need?
No, I appreciate the question, and kind of specific to the income support portion. I know our colleagues at Social Service would be happy to answer that, but what I think is a good and pertinent question is about engagement in underrepresented groups into the labor market, and it was a big part of the labor market strategy, and there was a lot of significant consideration that went into, and we talked about it in our last discussion and a couple of discussions before about really how it is always a central direction that we look for ways to make sure we are engaging underrepresented groups, but particularly Indigenous Saskatchewanians into the labor market. So that was a major component of what we were looking to do through the labor market strategy. And I'm maybe going to ask one of our team as well to maybe talk a little bit about the elements in the labor market strategy and beyond. I mean, we didn't put everything into the labor market strategy that we're doing in that regard, but about the work that has been done on engaging Indigenous people into the training systems, whether that be through the essential skills component of our program delivery. A very significant component of our essential skills financial allocation is actually delivered on reserve. And we made a decision to do that, a number of years ago where, there are other jurisdictions where jurisdictional issues really complicate how some of these programs are delivered. We made a policy choice that, there are not illegitimate jurisdictional questions around some of these things, but that we would deliver provincial programming on reserve when it came to labor market training because it was the right thing to do. And we allocate a significant component of our essential skills training directly on reserve. I think it's probably about half as far as the adult basic education training allocation. But I will let our Darcy maybe speak to this one in more detail. Good question.
Sure. Again, thank you for the question. I think we have a continuum of programs and services that are available to individuals who are underemployed or underrepresented in the labor market. That continuum ranges from access to the 10 career services SAS Jobs offices that we have located around the province, where they can access a variety of services from job search and resume writing services up through career counseling for programs and access to programs and services for specialized employment services. A lot of those folks that are coming through our service are persons with disabilities, and those may be a little bit more marginalized in terms of having access to the labor market. Right now, we're looking for every way to activate the entire population of Saskatchewan in terms of making sure that they're prepared for the opportunities that are here today and the ones that are emerging. The workforce development programs provide access, direct services for, I said, counselors in our own operations. We contract with a number of organizations and CBOs around the province to provide those specialized services as well. We have a number of different programs that are supporting this. Targeted initiatives for older workers, self-employment programs are part of the mix. We make significant investments with SIIT for their career center operations. They had over 6,000 clients come through their service array last year. And with respect to our Indigenous training folks, we've got a significant collaboration, as the minister outlined, with our post-secondary training partners for essential skills training in the province. It's a $24 million investment. About 60% of the learners that come through the essential skills programs, and it's an array of programs from basic essential literacy development right up through the acquisition of your grade 12. About 60% of those learners are Indigenous, and about 60% are also female. So we're looking at programs to make sure that they have access to those foundational skills that they need to make sure they have access to those jobs that exist today.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Assistant Deputy Minister, for taking those in consideration. Because when people have jobs, they are really more happy, more beneficial to the economy, less stress, less mental issue because they're engaged in community. Thank you for that. It looked like that there has been a reduction in funding for ICS this year as compared to last year. The comparison of figures, if I say last year was 164 million and this year is 160.5 million. Can you confirm that, Minister?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And there were a couple of changes to the budget, which I think at the end of the day really don't have a major impact as far as the ability to do training programs. But there was a federal transfer that was concluded. It was a COVID era program that was called Skills for Success that the federal government had sunsetted the funding on. So that was really a big part of the reason. Another part was on the internationally educated nurses. We had allocated resources for a longer training program that ended up being necessary through the HHR plan. So yeah, kind of a good thing in that we didn't have to spend as much on it to put the same number of folks through and get credentialed in a shorter period of time. So those were really the reasons for it. What we did do is allocate additional resources, though, within the budget to our credential recognition office. So that was a significant new initiative within our budget, nearly $1 million that we are adding over and above what we had been doing already. But really, we have reorganized within the ministry to set up a credential recognition. We call it the Credential Recognition Service, but it's really a branch within the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training to do this work. And I kind of offhandedly referenced in my opening comments that we are the only province in Canada that really does this. We actually presented to the Forum of Labor Market Ministers a few months ago, Winnipeg, it was January or February, I forget what kind of walk through what we were doing. We weren't able to publicly announce it to yet because it was a part of the budget deliberation process, but through that organization, federal, provincial, territorial ministers, which meets quite regularly, to really share best practices. And this is how and why most of the other provinces in Canada have copied our foreign qualification legislation. And I fully expect, I'm happy that they're doing it, but I fully expect you're going to see other provinces in Canada move to setting up separate organizations within their labor market departments or ministries, as the case may be, to really pursue very specifically credential recognition. So, we're really pioneering this, and I'd said in kind of the earlier estimates in trade and export, you've probably seen signs up around the city of Regina. You would see them in Saskatoon. I haven't been to Moose Jaw and Prince Albert, but I think we have the same product that is up in those communities as well. And really what they come down to is saying if you have a credential or a skill that you've obtained from outside of Saskatchewan or outside of Canada, and you want that credential or skill recognized in Saskatchewan, call us. And the idea being, and not just the idea, what we are going to be doing is working, and are already, individually with folks who have a credential that they have obtained from outside of Saskatchewan to get that credential recognized. And this can be really a daunting process. I mean, you well know, I mean, this is a very daunting process for newcomers, especially newcomers to Canada, who have a skill, obtained it outside of the country at an institution, that may have a slightly different way of training than an institution in Saskatchewan. It's a daunting process to try and actually get that credential recognized. So we want to really cut out what would be a very challenging process for newcomers or for those from outside of Saskatchewan or in other parts of Canada to really cut through that and have people who are dedicated to working with our regulators and with our newcomers to make it happen, to get to yes, to find a way to make sure that our newcomers to Canada or newcomers to Saskatchewan are able to attach to the labor force, enter the labor market at the maximum capacity that they have based on their training. So that's why we're advertising it around the province to make sure that there's an awareness that this service exists. And we have dedicated and have really organized it in such a way that we have back-end support to make this successful. And I think it'd be fair to say I'd actually be interested in the latest update from our team, because I haven't asked this question in a couple of weeks. But I know we have had a very significant spike in communications or contact from newcomers based on this, and really we've had the online component of the campaign running for some time now, but we really only have the billboards up in the last couple of weeks here. So I fully expect that we are going to be seeing a big uptick in the amount of interest in accessing the credential recognition service. But that really, is going to be a major undertaking as far as a reallocation of resources within the budget. We put significant additional resources into administering the Immigration Services Act as well. And I'll maybe not get into all of that right this moment, but I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about some elements of that, if not here tonight, then when we do committee stage of the bill as well. But we put very significant resources into our immigration program, in addition to what already had been significant resources to address these two items. So, good question.
Thank you, Minister, for your detailed explanation for that. The question I asked, I was just a little bit worried it will affect our immigration programs, this budget. But eventually, if we are saving money, it's great. But if you say that this is the protocol of COVID, might be in COVID we were using some money extra for extra things. But if it is not affecting, that's great. I'm a critic of immigration, person of color. People comes to me a lot for different issue concerns. I believe that none of your officers will got a letter from my office about credential, which is great, and I appreciate for that. So what are the implications of this budget reduction? So there will be no application, any kind of effect on this one that we reduce the budget?
On the federal funding component on that part of the program?
It's gone from 160 million to, from 164 to 160.
Yeah, I mean, the federal funding reduction, so that program is just sunsetted is basically what happened on that one. Okay. One of the things that's interesting about this ministry is because a lot of the actual program delivery is done by partners, you actually end up with significant variation between years about basically how the contract systems all work with these things. So I'm not the kind of subject matter expert in how that's all administered, but that's one of the differences than you would find with some of the other line ministries in government is the significant reliance on partnerships with third parties to do program delivery. So I think that was a part of the other component of the funding reduction on our internationally educated nurses, which I had referenced, because our partners who are delivering the service actually, and it's Polly that does the program delivery. there had been, and this is really quite a win, I would say, as far as the credential recognition component. The bridging program that had existed initially for internationally educated nurses was around, I think it was a 2-year bridging program. Obviously for nurses, whether they're trained in Philippines or, the United Kingdom or, places which have very good training for international educated healthcare providers, there was still, because of the way the regulator had structured the ability to have your credential recognized in Saskatchewan, it was a 2-year bridging program. So, our view was that was not a reasonable proposition, given the fact that you had been a fully accredited nurse in another part of the world. Understanding that there are some elements that need to be learned in the Saskatchewan system, but it doesn't take 2 years. So we worked with the regulator on that, and SaskPoly worked with the regulator and worked with ICT and worked with the Ministry of Health and the SHA about what a reasonable bridging process and timeframe would look like and how that program could be delivered by SaskPoly. So where we ended up landing, this was not overnight. There was a lot of work that went into this, but we got to a 14-week program, which is really quite a remarkable thing to go from a 2-year required bridging program to a 14-week program to have a foreign-trained, internationally educated nurse be able to enter into our healthcare system providing care for Saskatchewan people. So I really take my hat off to all of those involved in getting to that time. But what we had actually budgeted through the Health Human Resources plan when it was put together was predicated on the much longer training program, which obviously would have cost significantly more than a 14-week program. So that's one of the reasons why you end up with a lower budget, is because of the fact that we're actually doing things more efficiently and it doesn't cost as much. So, you have different elements of that with third-party contract providers or third-party delivery options. We're always seeking to work with our providers to find efficiencies and better ways of doing things, which allows us then to do reallocations into the department on high priority initiatives. So that was why I kind of went to the additional resource allocation for whether it be the Immigration Services Act or what was the other 900,000 we put into 50. Sorry, there was another initiative which I referenced, which slipped my mind after 4 hours of committee. So, but anyway, that's kind of the long answer to the question.
Well, thank you very much for that. So when we're bringing a workforce from abroad, like I do understand that nurses came from Philippines, which was the short-term solution that we got out from COVID, and a lot of burden was on our healthcare. So do we have any planning in long term that we can have to invest over here locally? I can give you one example just from my own family. One of my daughters, she's down in Toronto University, she's doing biomedical physics. The other day she was telling Mom that when I do my PhD, I will come and work in Regina. And I was listening to them. I said, why you will come to Regina? And then she said, Dad, Mom make a very good food. So our kids like this place, and it doesn't matter, child want to stay with them. And I guess in long-term solution, that will be great, so we can retain our people over here and invest over here in long-term.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, I would say that this is an area where a lot of thought has been put in by our senior team in making sure that, we have the we have the right processes, we're asking the right questions as well at the front end of going through the recruitment or immigration process to really make sure that, we have a limited number of spots in these programs, that those who are making application coming through the process, have a intention of residing, or at least hoping to reside long-term in the jurisdiction here that they're relocating to. So I'll maybe ask one of our team to talk about maybe what some of those what some of those actual structural changes have looked like within the ministry. One observation I would add, and it's really been kind of through firsthand experience in how we have really been pioneering in a lot of ways some of the recruitment globally. And what really has worked has been employer-led training. So you have your employers who are employer-led recruitment who really have a clear idea as to the number of positions and what positions they want to hire for, have work that's been done in advance where they have applications from folks. So, we did this in Warsaw and we did this in the Philippines, and, our intention is to do this in other jurisdictions beyond that. That would include India, that would include Vietnam. I think we are giving consideration to and working through some details on that as well. By having your employers with you, understanding what they need, having done the groundwork in advance, and employers who we have worked with to make sure that at the other end, the settlement component to that is in place, which really is a hugely significant part of long-term outcomes, is having front-end settlement in a good spot. And also as a part of that, having officials with the employers able to really do some of the interviewing and the processing part of it face to face. It makes a difference. It really does. And so I'll maybe ask Krista to maybe speak to how we have been doing that. But I think increasingly what you are going to see is more a larger component of our entire program being processed, recruited, worked with in that way, because I think it does lead to better outcomes and better retention. So,
sure. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Krista Ross, Assistant Deputy Minister. So you asked specifically about health, and certainly there's a comprehensive and aggressive health human resources action plan by government. So we support that work along with colleagues from Ministry of Health and Ministry of Advanced Education. And we're looking at all options in terms of developing the labor we need and the skills locally, as well as outside of Saskatchewan and then outside of Canada as well. So to the example or the family member you mentioned, I know we've talked a lot already about credential recognition services, and most of us probably think of international or foreign credentials first. But the office is also set up to support labor mobility within Canada, because there continue to be barriers. Whatever the regulated occupation may be, there isn't necessarily an automatic, streamlined process to have your licensure move from one province to another province. So we do provide a service for and supports for labor mobility applicants as well. So that would help nurses or whatever the health profession may be who might be looking or working elsewhere in Canada to be able to come to Saskatchewan and get to work as quickly as possible. So the credential recognition service, just to go into a bit more detail than what the minister has already shared, it is a relatively new service that we've set up over the past year. And with a pretty ambitious marketing campaign, we are starting to see an increase in the number of individuals who are reaching out to us seeking that service. So for the most part, it is individuals who are already in Saskatchewan and have mostly been here for a number of years and are looking to have their credentials recognized. But we are also seeing some traffic coming from other parts of Canada. And some of that was generated or motivated by some of the job fairs we recently attended. So I think in the minister's opening remarks, he mentioned a recruitment fair, a job fair we attended in Toronto and Calgary. And actually we had somebody from our Credential Recognition Services office there in person to answer questions. And I think he was probably the most busy, just for individuals who had already immigrated, but again, were still facing barriers or unsure of a way forward in terms of having their credentials recognized. So generated quite a bit of interest from our other parts of the country as well in the service and looking for opportunities to come to Saskatchewan and work.
Thank you. It's looked like that the labor market program budget is down from 130.9 million to 127.2 million. Can you confirm that, Minister?
No, appreciate the question. So yeah, we just looked over the subvote ICO4. So those were really the components that we had talked about before. And there was an addition in that one on the SATCC funding. So it balanced out to, with the reductions that we had talked about already on the Skills for Success and some of the reductions on the HHR plan because of the efficiency. That's why it came out that way.
Thank you. Government consistently speak to the need to be responsive, which is great, I will say that, to the need of the student community and labor market, yet you are still cutting funds from labor market program. Can you please explain that?
Yeah, no, I think we had kind of talked about maybe a little bit just on the details on the subvote on ICO4 and why that is. You know, one of the additional components we made though was around the labor market plan that we had put forward, and you know that really kind of encapsulates a lot of different elements of whether it be ICO4 or whether it be some of the other subvotes, and you know the different elements that went into the development of the plan. So I'll maybe talk just a touch about that because we, you know, I think have canvassed in some degree of detail kind of the pillars of what we are seeking to do through the labor market strategy. But you know, one of the real things that we work hard to do, and I talked about a bit about this in the trade and export development estimates, but there's a very close relationship, obviously, between immigration and career training and trade and export development that goes beyond just kind of sharing a minister. You know, there's very much a relationship that has to be and is very close because of the fact that we have different elements that directly impact both parts of the ministry. So we worked really side by side in the creation of the labor market strategy and the investment attraction strategy because they go together in so many very real and substantive ways. So that means, you know, working with our stakeholder groups, whether that be our chambers of commerce, whether that be our like Hospitality Saskatchewan. There is, you know, a very long list of third-party groups who are industry representatives or, you know, businesses and others that had really identified when we were coming out of COVID that they felt we were going to have a significant labor market challenge, and it was not something that we, you know, probably at the very start of COVID expected we were going to see, but you know, Darcy alluded to some of the challenges, I think, of the shrinking labor market pool that came out of the pandemic, where you had folks who were leaving the labor market probably a few years earlier in some cases than would have been expected, and that really led to a very apparent tightening in the labor market elasticity. So we ended up with the, you know, Darcy talked about it, the 1-to-1 vacancy to unemployment ratio, which is about as tight of a labor market as you can find, and that happened pretty quickly. We had thankfully been doing some work on that in advance and planning, but that was, you know, part of coming out of that was the genesis of working on a labor market strategy. So, you know, where that all ended up landing was, you know, the major effort being on ensuring that those who are here in this province have first opportunity to take advantage of jobs that are being created, really engaging underrepresented groups into the labor market. And that means, you know, significant focus on Indigenous people and on those with disabilities, and finding ways that we could pathway these folks into the labor market. And I think, you know, we're seeing results from that. We're kind of seeing them month to month that are really quite positive. And then, of course, on the credential recognition piece, we talked about a bit, and on the recruitment part, which, I think we've had a bit of a discussion on as well. So.
Thank you, Minister. Saving money is always good for family, for government as well. The more money you save, the more we can do. But I'm just worried that whatever we are reducing money or amount in, especially I can see a reduction in essential skill training, and I can see in pre-employment program and services skill training program in the budget there is a reduction in all of them. If you think that it is optimal solution that we are getting same benefit that we were taking in last year budget, with less budget we are achieving our objective, that's perfectly okay with me. But if there's anything else that reduction is affecting any of the training, then can you please brief me about that, please?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I do, and I think we're not losing capacity. I think we're probably gaining capacity, and for the reasons we talked about. One of the areas where there has been significant additional investment into has been around the Apprenticeship and Training Certification Commission. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but one of the really, and I think it was, got some attention, but it was actually really quite a significant in-year adjustment where we added beyond the seats that had even been planned to be added, and beyond what we had even allocated in the last budget. Over and above that, we were able and in a position to add more resources. So maybe I'll have, Darcy, do you want to maybe talk about SATCC and just kind of what the implications of that are and the significance of the additional seats being added?
Thank you, Minister. I mentioned earlier that there's a significant demand for construction and skilled trades in the province. And this is where our work really does closely align with the investment attraction strategy. We're working very closely with the Ministry of Trade and Export Development, along with other ministries and crowns and government, to identify early where those projects are going to be located in the province, understand the size of the workforce they're going to need and the requirements that they're going to have, and the sequencing of those projects, and doing a bit of a forecast in terms of what we need to do in terms of apprenticeship-related training or skilled trades training through our regional college system for pre-employment apprenticeship. So last year we made an investment for 250 seats. We have increased that again this year by another 250 seats, and at the end of the fiscal last year added an investment that would load in another 100 seats. So that's a 650 seat lift in the apprenticeship training system year over year. We think that capacity matches the existing demand to make sure that we have a skilled workforce in line with the timing of the projects that are coming online. And that in conjunction with a $2.5 million investment we made through the college system last year to do pre-employment skilled trades training, which has been maintained this year. We'll make sure that we have access to another 200 to 250 training seats for individuals interested in a variety of skilled trades for the system.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just to confirm that these reductions that we can see will not losing job opportunity that we are forecasting?
Yeah, I would say that, no, I don't think we're losing any opportunities. The reality is that, we do have a labor market challenge on our hands in that we have a shortage of folks in particular areas, and we talked a little bit about that earlier today. But really, I would say there's an economy-wide challenge. Some of these sectors probably have more acute issues, and it is, a bit of a movable thing depending on a variety of factors. But that really has been the focus, though, is how can we allocate resources such that we are going to be able to fill the jobs that are being created right now in the economy, and that means the very large investments into the mining space, into the energy space, into the ag tech, ag value added space. A lot of these are highly dependent on those with trade certifications. not just and only that, but that is really where, we had seen and do see a challenge in front of us. So adding more resources into that space. Also, the international recruitment part of this is not to be underrated. We have had, really quite a remarkable success in a couple of the international recruitment missions that we did, where employers who, were a part of the mission, they, had a well-defined target for what they were seeking. And there was one case, there were, I think, 8 welders, one of our companies, a well-known company here in Regina, I won't name who it was, but well-known company here in Regina, they wanted to find 8 welders. Well, as it turns out, they came back with 16 welders. It was, really very successful for them. And it wasn't that they didn't want to hire welders from Regina. It was simply that there were not enough people to actually fill the jobs that they were needing to fill to actually deliver the orders, which are ever increasing from their business around the world. So that really is what's driving the international recruitment component to this. There was another very large employer here in the province with a number of different sites across Saskatchewan. But I think they were looking to hire 10 or 12 mechanics, and they ended up hiring about double the number of mechanics that they were hoping to hire, which, really for them is a huge benefit. But it wasn't, again, because they didn't want to not hire mechanics from Saskatchewan or from other parts of the country. They just couldn't find them. So those are going to be initiatives which we think have been successful. These are often companies that are quite sophisticated, so they have understandings of what settlement outcomes and success look like, and how to create the conditions for long-term attachment to both their company and to the province. And this is going to be a part of how we make sure that our retention rates are higher. And these are really positive partnerships that are going to benefit companies, they're going to benefit the province, they're going to benefit everybody across Saskatchewan. So that really is what I see as a win-win-win, and that's why we're going to continue on the international recruitment part for those gaps that we just kind of can't fill here in Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Minister. In 2022-2023, I see that from annual report that were over 8.2 million website visit to the sasjob.ca, which is a huge hit on that site, and the total of 182,187 job posting. What does this say about the need for the labor market program in this province?
Yeah, I mean, it's been very successful, our SAS Jobs website, and maybe just kind of a bit of a backstory on SAS Jobs as well, because this is a site that we put significant resources into as a province, because it's worked and it works for our employers. Our employers like the website. I think our job seekers are familiar and like the functionality of it as well. There was actually a circumstance 8 or 10 years ago where the federal government actually, I think it was about 8 years ago, the federal government actually basically tried to get provinces and territories to all use their national job bank system by financially incentivizing provinces to become a part of it. And there were a number of strings that came along with this, which happens with federal government, bearing gifts, I guess. But they had what it all boiled down to was the National Job Bank. They wanted to rebrand with a SAS Jobs logo and say that that was the Saskatchewan National Job Bank website. As it turns out, it never worked. It was basically impossible for our employers to use, and there were a whole bunch of reasons why they really, really didn't like it. So we ended up basically saying we're not going to use your federal website. We're going to put additional money. We put significant, like millions of dollars into making sure that our SAS Jobs website has maintained functionality for our employers and prospective employees of those employers over the course of the last 8 or 10 years. So I'm not sure if the federal government are still trying to get PTs to do that. Probably. I don't know. Sound about par for the course for them, but we are not going to be using the National Job Bank website. And that really has resulted in the success of that site. So 8.2 million visits in 22-23. I would actually suspect it'll be higher this year. I don't know if we have data for that or not. It'll be published at the appropriate time. I think as of last week, there were about 14,000-ish jobs. I'm not sure what it is today, but it's really a functional site. It works well, and we work with our employers carefully, closely to make sure that they, appreciate the functionality and it's as user-friendly as possible. So I'm not sure, Darcy, you want to talk about SAS Jobs?
Minister, maybe I'll just add a couple of things.
Sure.
In 2023, we had nearly 7,700 employers registered to use the sasjobs.ca system. And they posted over 170,000 vacancies over that year, which was the highest year we had on record. In 23-24, so the current year, this is to the end of February, we had, again, about 7,600 employers registered on the system, tracking again to 170,000 plus job vacancies being advertised. So at any given day, we're probably averaging about 14,000 job postings.
So, and I would add to that as well, and it's a part of how we do our labor market baselining as well. It's really quite a valuable source of real-time data about where we have gaps in the labor market, and it feeds into the other data that we have that might not be quite as time sensitive, but it's a part of that matrix that you asked about in your first question about how do we do both short, medium, and long-term labor market planning and resource allocation based on that. So SAS Jobs is a not insignificant part of some of that data that goes into making some of those decisions as well, beyond the actual day-to-day use of the website.
So just to confirm me that the sasjob.ca, this website is taking a posting from each and every company worldwide, or from throughout the country, or it just restricted with our under the umbrella of Sask province?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. These are Saskatchewan employers who are posting on the system, but we do have people looking for those jobs from all over the world, really. I think in March of 24, we had 55% of the visits on the site were from people in Saskatchewan looking for work. 36% were from the provinces or territories in the country, and 9% were from international locations.
Thank you. Your annual report acknowledged referral from social services indicating in 2022-2023, ICT Imply met with 2,213 social service clients to create an action plan to support their career development goal and connection with the labor market. It stated that of 563 clients whose action plan were closed, and 52% went to the employment, 30% continued to further education. These numbers look good, but why were only 563 action plan closed out of 2,213 client referred? What happened with the rest?
Thank you very much for the question. Rochelle Burgoyne, I'm the Deputy Minister. When we're talking about the clients that haven't successfully completed those action plans, there's generally a number of reasons. In some cases, they're still ongoing. Life happens for individuals while they're in progress in working through that program. Perhaps their spouse has a job in a different community. They have a child that takes them out of the labor force for a period of time. Health concerns. In some cases, our clients aren't prepared to transition through that work plan. Perhaps there's a mental health or physical health illness that requires them to then seek service back through our partners in the Ministry of Social Services. And so it is very probable and certainly hopeful that we'll see them return to our system again, but we do not conclude the action plan until they have successfully completed the program.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. It's very hard to do whatever you want, but I do understand that. Thank you for that. I note that budget support employment for person with disability, in the last year we have the same funding as we have for this year. I understand that SID caseload at social services has been growing up significantly. Do you not think that it's important to increase the employment opportunity for people with disability? And I think Minister talked about that, but I was just having some thoughts about that. If we have the same funding, we are increasing our what?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'll probably ask the team to maybe speak to a little bit of our individualized approaches or the approach to persons with disabilities. But one of the kind of overarching things to take into account with labor market programming is components of labor market programming are provincial resources. Other components are cost-shared resources with the federal government, and there are transfers from the federal government that are allocated very specifically for different envelopes of labor market training. We report them back to the federal government. Those are based on long-term agreements, so there is not variation year to year. There is on occasion, but it'll be when there's a change in the relationship or contract with the federal government on that. So the way that persons with disabilities funding, much of it, we have components of this that are provincially funded, of course, but what might be showing up, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact figure that you're looking at in front of you, but there had been, as a part of the way the federal transfers worked, a dedicated allocation for persons with disabilities. It's now a part of the overall LMDA, right? The LMDA PD that rolled in. So again, kind of even more context, I guess. The way the federal transfers work, there had been originally 4 different transfers that the federal government had set up. They were deeply complex, and they were, from a reporting and administration context, really quite a nightmare. We've been allocating for well over 10 years that they needed to be rolled into more manageable and sensible envelopes, but there had been 4 of them at one point. There was a labor market transfer agreement, there was a labor market development agreement, there was a targeted initiative for older workers, and there was a labor market development for persons with disabilities. So the envelopes that kind of were allocated were rolled into the labor market development and labor market transfer agreement. So we only have 2 now, but there still exist these categories that had been independent standalones before. So the federal funding in these things, well, there's actually an LMDA top-up as well, without muddying the waters even more incomprehensibly, but these are agreements we have with the federal government. So they have a allocated and dedicated amount that's put into them, and we often will have additional parts of that we put into it. But it's and a lot of these kind of programs are delivered by third parties as well. We don't do all of the program delivery, but as far as persons with disabilities, I will ask Rochelle if you want to.
Yes. Thank you very much, Minister. And so it is our hope when individuals enter those programs that they ultimately obtain an employment outcome or the opportunity for additional training that would better suit them to achieve their career goal. And so a good outcome would not be to maintain the status quo for individuals that are enrolling in those programs. We want to make sure the programs are tailored in such a way through our community partners that the individuals in the programs achieve the outcome that they've intended to achieve and have the supports that they do. At that point, they would typically move either into employment or into employment where accommodation can be made to support them, and there are other avenues for funding available. So that would be where you would see the provincial disability strategy, for example, come into play to be able to support accessible workplaces, for an example. At the same time, we also, while this I think it's 9.893 million is dedicated specifically to employability assistance for people with disabilities. That does not exclude the participation of people with disabilities in any number of our other labor market programs. So we're very confident that we have the tools in place to be able to ensure that those individuals who are participating in the program have that pathway to employment, really going back to that first pillar of our labor market strategy to ensure that all Saskatchewan residents have barriers removed, to ensure that they are participating fully in the economy to the extent that they are both willing and able to do so. And so there's a suite of programs and services that really are designed to serve that. And the outcomes that we see from this funding envelope are largely positive, thanks to the really terrific work of our partners in the communities that are delivering those services.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that. I mean, there are partners who do program delivery, but also businesses that are just very, very open to finding solutions, and I think they view it as win-wins as well, right? I mean, they're getting good employees, and it all works out very well. And so the kind of whole backstory to the how the labor market programming is delivered, I think I might have talked about it a number of years ago, but I really view this as kind of an analogous circumstance to how immigration programming is going to develop, and they're both within the same file. But labor market programming had, up until the mid-1990s, been duplicated in function by federal and provincial governments who both had separate ways and separate avenues for labor market programming to be developed. What happened in the 1995 federal budget is the government of Canada really at that point made a unilateral decision to just say, well, there were support, I think, for this from provinces and territories in the aggregate, but they said, we're out. We will transfer you through dedicated transfers, and there were, at that point, I think 2 of them. You PTs then deliver the labor market programming. You're closer to your labor market. You understand the needs better. It was the right decision. It was. I'm a little worried that we're seeing some backsliding on that overall approach. I haven't actually had a chance to talk to my team what was in the federal budget today, but there was a degree of concern that the feds might be moving away from that.
We're a silent minister, so we don't know.
Okay, well, we'll take that as a win. Really, what the case that we have been making, and we've made this case at both the immigration minister's table and at the labor market table, is that the devolution of labor market funding to PTs has resulted in better outcomes, whether it be for persons with disabilities, which Deputy Minister had just spoken to, whether that be for other underrepresented groups in the labor market, Indigenous people, whether that be for newcomers. You have better outcomes through a single delivery mechanism with a better understanding, being closer to labor market and employers. Same case we've been making with immigration. Why provinces and territories are better positioned to actually do the selection component, because we have a closer attachment to newcomer communities in our provinces. We have a better understanding as to how we're going to get better settlement outcomes in communities, and understanding how labor market attachment and even things as granular as regulatory processes is going to translate for newcomers to have credentials recognized. So I really think that we've seen this right now. The federal government have been reluctant to characterize, I think, what they're doing quite how they are doing it, which is a recognition that that's probably the right argument, that provinces probably are better positioned to actually deliver selection, particularly on the economic front on immigration. We want family class as well. That was a part of our immigration accord we submitted. The federal government will not provide that authority to any province or territory right now, and I want to be very clear about that. We have requested that authority. Quebec they haven't received that authority through their immigration accord either. But I think there will come a day where basically provinces will do the vast majority, which we already do in Saskatchewan, the vast majority of processing of immigration. But it's because of the size of our program relative to federal streams. But I think ultimately it'll get to that place with most PTs. So that's really an analogous situation, though, to what we saw in the labor market with the devolution of funding historically by the Government of Canada to PTs.
Thank you, Minister and Deputy Minister. So I will just move to another area of my critic, that's full-time equivalency and salary. What were the total salary dollar for the ministry this year as compared to the last year, and how many staff do we have?
So in 2023-24, we had a total of 264 FTEs at the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training for a total salary of $20,274,000. In 2024-25, we had a total number of 273 FTEs. So we received an additional 9 FTEs in this year's budget, and those are primarily supporting the credential recognition service as well as the immigration program more broadly.
Were there any laid off?
No.
Thank you. I note that there has been a significantly increase to support nomination through the Saskatchewan nominee program, as the Minister talked about that. And for the fraud detection and this program, was this funding increase for additional staff?
For the
Program compliance.
Oh, yeah. I'll maybe actually let the team speak. I'll introduce that by saying, yeah, we're going to be adding additional resources to the immigration program. They're for a variety of reasons, and partly it's because we're transferring some of the responsibilities that had previously been in another ministry into immigration and career training as well. But I'm not sure, Rochelle, if you want to speak to that, or Krista, you want to?
I think it's
Krista,
probably
yeah, sure.
Thank you for the question. So the additional resources are going into what we are calling the program compliance branch. So that's essentially the branch that is going to be responsible for administering and enforcing the new Immigration Services Act that was just introduced last week. So we're expanding our capacity there in order to be able to effectively administer and enforce that new legislation. And as the Minister said, 2 of those incremental positions are actually just a transfer from the Ministry of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety as responsibility for the existing Foreign Worker Recruitment and Immigration Services Act has transferred from LRWS to Immigration and Career Training. So they had 2 dedicated positions for that act. So those resources came along with responsibility for the legislation.
Has there been a change to the salaries in training or employment training services?
So the salaries within the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training?
Yes.
So they are part of the overall Public Service Commission compensation package, which would be consistent with other ministries and agencies across the public service.
Okay. It seems to me that you increase the staffing for immigration support and fraud detection and reduce the staffing for training and employment services. What is the net difference of that?
So in training and employment services, we have moved some of the resources that we've had support typically in the past as part of an organizational restructuring to be able to better position the ministry as a whole to respond to the 3 priorities in the labour market strategy. So we didn't reduce any jobs, but we may have changed the scope of people's roles. For example, we opened an office for the first time specifically designed to support Indigenous services and the northern economy related to opportunities in the north. And so we've shifted some of the focus, but we haven't changed the overall footprint. In fact, we've increased it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Deputy Minister. About immigration, what is the status of immigration agreement with the federal government?
Yeah. So there's a number of components to this. I'll maybe speak to the immigration accord that was proposed, but there are several other kind of almost day-to-day relationships that we have with the federal government when it comes to what is the area of shared constitutional jurisdiction on immigration. So we had put forward in 2022, I think, the immigration accord proposal, which sought an increased number to our provincial nominee program. Firstly, it was an increase. We've seen an increase to the PMP program subsequent to that. Not quite to the level which we requested, but there's still some moving parts on all of this, and I think, frankly, there's a bit of confusion on the part of the federal government about how they're going to be allocating PMP spots within the overall system. So that will be a point of discussion. We have a FPT meeting with the federal minister and other provinces and territories in about a month, and this will be a primary area of discussion. So there's kind of that element on the allocation, but we have received a commitment to a significantly higher allocation. There was an element that we had asked for control over the selection component on economic migration. The federal government have made some not insignificant changes to how selection is done, which has given provinces and territories significantly more authority over the selection component, which goes to the earlier discussion we had around provinces being better positioned to do selection, because I think we are closer to our labor markets and have a better understanding of what is going to lead to successful outcomes for newcomers, really with an aggregate benefit for everybody. So that was one part of it. We had asked for control over the family class of immigration as well. The federal government are deeply resistant to having family class selection given to provinces and territories. That is probably their line in the sand on a lot of things, but I think ultimately that will end up maybe not in a straight up policy change, but in a de facto sense. I think more of that will happen over time through design changes within PNPs or criteria within PNPs that allow for different allocation of points and those sort of things. So that was one part of it. The other thing, which I really think is essential and will happen eventually, is going to be the transfer of settlement funding. This is an area where I think there is an undue amount of potential duplication, not always in practice, but you end up with situations where right-hand, left-hand scenarios are not entirely aligned. We're fortunate in Saskatchewan in that we have a fairly small number of settlement organizations that do a lot of the work. So it's a pretty small world in that we know each other and can have discussions about what is being provided by one level of government or what's being provided by the other to try and avoid duplication. But I can assure members that in some other jurisdictions that maybe aren't, have larger populations, more providers, there are real issues on duplication of service. So So I think having the settlement services devolved through provinces and territories to partner with third-party delivery organizations, again, like labor market programming, will provide better outcomes for newcomers than having federal and provincial with different contractual relationships. So that was kind of what we had proposed. So we've gotten significant traction on large parts of that. And I think even on the settlement funding part, there's a recognition on the part of the federal government that that's probably an argument that makes sense, but they're getting there. They're getting there. So we'll keep pushing on that one. As for the more formal structured relationship between PMPs, Provincial Immigration Department, what had been CIC, I forget what the acronym is now, but I mean, we have, very regular communication. There are formalized processes for changes to different PMP streams, which we do quite frequently, to respond to labor market demands, changes, those sort of things. But I'm not sure, maybe Christy, you want to speak to some of that, because it is kind of one of these areas where you do have joint constitutional authority over a single subject that can lead, I mean, I think by and large works decently well, but you end up with differential outcomes because you have, for example, I think our processing times now at the front end for our PMP process are 3-4 weeks. Maybe it depends on the stream, but it's relatively short. Whereas you had, PR, the actual admission part of it, which is the federal constitutional responsibility. This takes years, which is obviously very frustrating for newcomers who have made application through PNP. We can provide the nomination, and then you're kind of in a limbo waiting for. It was 4 years at one point, I think, for different streams to have the actual admission part of it done by the federal government. I think it's a little better now, but it's not great. So over to you, Kristen.
Sure. Thank you, Minister. So just a bit more context, I guess, around the structure to your question. We do have an agreement with the federal government, the Canada-Saskatchewan Immigration Agreement. It was signed in 2005, so it's a fairly dated agreement. There have been a few attempts over the years at renegotiating that agreement. Most recently, as the Minister mentioned, we presented our Saskatchewan Accord in 2022, modeled closely after the Quebec Accord. And while we haven't really seen IRCC kind of come to the table on that proposal, we've certainly made some progress outside of that as well, in terms of how we work with our federal colleagues. A couple of specific examples I can share with you is there was this long-standing issue of, again, a case of duplication where, under this agreement, we have the ability and the authority to operate the Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program, gives the province flexibility to design different categories and streams that align with our labor market needs and priorities. And it's an economic immigration program, but we found ourselves dealing with duplication when we would set that criteria, receive an application, determine that application meets criteria and that they will meet a labor market need or fill a labor market gap, approve them for nomination, which allows them to apply to the federal government for permanent residency. And then IRCC would assess that same application on their ability to economically establish in Saskatchewan. And I can remember at one point in the history of the program where that was actually a fairly prevalent issue we were dealing with, where we were seeing a higher level or a higher rate of refusals by the federal government for individuals that we had assessed based on the criteria that we had developed, because they didn't feel that individual would be able to economically establish in Saskatchewan. So that's been a sticking point, and I'm happy to report that we've made some progress there. And so we have agreement from IRCC, the federal department responsible for immigration, that they will no longer look at ability to economically establish with provincial nominees. So, that's just one example of how, even though we haven't formalized a new agreement, we've still made some progress on how we work with them. But under that agreement, we do have to work with the federal government on the design, implementation of any new streams or pilots. So we can't do that completely independently, but we have a really good working relationship with them. So it's very collaborative. And again, that's a relationship that has, I would say, matured and evolved over the years as well, where I'd say there's a very high level of trust from IRCC in how we're operating the program. But again, they set the overall immigration levels. They set the levels and allocations across the country for provincial nominee programs, and so we have a certain amount that we can work within. And then so that's the agreement, and more operationally how we work with IRCC. There is more formal federal, provincial, territorial forum of ministers responsible for immigration. Minister Harrison is actually the provincial co-chair right now. And we are hosting the provincial territorial secretariat for that for the next 3 years. So there is kind of more of a formal governance, formal FPT collaboration, and some structure to support that. So that's the group that Minister mentioned will be meeting in Montreal next month.
Yeah. So thanks, Krista, for that. Just a very good explanation. One of the challenges we have had is around that levels question, and I alluded to it a little bit in the last answer, but this has been really a moving target with the government of Canada through multiple governments. Frankly, I mean, there is a legislated time frame in which the levels plan had to be released, and there were always questions whether it would actually be released on time. Sometimes it wasn't, even when it was legally required to be. And then, we've encouraged at the FPT table, so other provinces and territories, to have multi-year levels planning, because for all of us, we're having to make decisions through our PMP on staffing levels, processing times, how we actually allocate resources within the program, based on levels that we find out about, literally days before or even into different fiscal years, and then have to try and adjust in year. So we historically had encouraged the federal government to do multi-year levels planning, which they finally got around to, and then they've changed it all again, in that the federal, their 3 or 4 year multi-year levels plan lasted for 1 year, and then entirely changed, and now they actually, I'm not actually sure what they know if they have a levels plan right now. So, well, this is what the FPT meeting in May is going to be all about, and I would say as well, this is kind of a multi-partisan frustration with the government of Canada, in that every Minister of Immigration in the country has the same challenge of basically trying to run a provincial nominee program, not entirely sure what your allocation of numbers are, but also then trying to allocate resources within the. So we're working to clarify this with our federal counterparts.
Thank you, Minister, Deputy Minister. Thank you for your detailed answer about that. Sometimes when I think about our students that coming from abroad, they spend about 4 years. They pay their tuition fee and they invest time over here. In 4 years, it's a good time of duration that they can learn language. And when they graduating, they have to go to different co-op and different kind of jobs, and they develop work ethics as well. And it is sometimes like very frustrating for some students when they do on work permit and they can't get a job in the industry where they graduated from. Especially if I talk about IT industry, we don't have a really big IT industry over here that like Seattle or somewhere else like Microsoft, we don't have. And especially people in oil engineering, like petroleum engineering, we don't have a lot of industry over here. They can get a job over here. They're very well qualified. They can be a good resource over here in labor market as well. After 9 months or 10 months that they can get a job, they will have to leave the country. Is there any way that we can utilize those people over here? Because they are ready-made. We are not investing any money on that. On a family sponsor nominee program, or when we assign P program, when the family comes, they will come husband and wife, might be both of them will be not up to the level. They will still draining the money from our economy. They will go to open door. They might go on social services. They have children. To bring a person at the age of 50 that they will be able to speak or learn English, it's going to be very hard. So these are the cream that we have it. Why not we have to utilize them so that we can fill the gap of shortage of our labor market.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the student part of it first. So, we have, there's been actually a lot of kind of attention nationally paid to some of the changes the federal government had made with regard to the number of temporary permits that were going to be issued for students. And I think, in Ontario, as an example, it probably is going to be a 50% reduction, right, in the number of permits that are going to be issued. There's a reason that that impacted disproportionately Ontario and British Columbia. And I would say that there is a reason why that really is likely not going to have a significant impact, if any impact, in a substantive way on Saskatchewan. And it's because our post-secondaries really have been very responsible about how they have built and grown their institutions to be really quite cognizant of making sure that international students are going to be in a position to be successful through their academic period and also then into a labor market period post. There have been some really terrible stories that have come out of other jurisdictions, and there's probably some here too where much less proportionately, but it's because of the really very large increase in temporary student visas that have been issued by the GOC based on submissions from post-secondaries in other jurisdictions. So we really are fortunate not to have that same issue that exists in some other provinces. But, what we really do seek to do, though, is make sure that, those who are graduating, those who wish to stay here, are going to be able to do that through our provincial nominee program or through a federal stream if that's what they choose to do. But I maybe ask Krista to speak to this, but of those who go through our provincial nominee stream, there are a very high proportion that have been here in a temporary context prior to actually going through the SIMP process. And a lot of those have been students. So we view this as being a long-term sort of relationship, which is not, I think, the case everywhere. We want students who are here on a temporary document to stay here for the long term and build their lives here. I think the universities are of the same mindset, that they actually see this as being a lifetime sort of thing, not just a 4-year, we'll take your money and that sort of thing. So that is a difference, I think, as to how Saskatchewan has approached this. But feel free, Kristen.
Sure. Thank you, Minister. So just in case you aren't aware, there is a student category through the Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program. So it is, designed, available specifically for the intention of trying to attract and retain international students who have chosen Saskatchewan to study for all the reasons that you've already mentioned in terms of, they've lived here for a number of years, they're completed post-secondary education in English, and obviously would be skilled individuals now. So many reasons why we would want to try and retain them and support them to find employment in the province as well. So I think last year, just to the Minister's point, about 20% of individuals coming through the nominee program were temporary residents. So that would include international students or also individuals who came perhaps through the temporary foreign worker program first. So 20% of just over 7,000 nominations. We do know that there is a higher the population of international students in Saskatchewan is higher than that. We do see some leaving after graduation, so choosing to find opportunities elsewhere in Canada. And we have seen a trend as well for those who do stay and apply to the SNP, are nominated and obtain their permanent residency. that's also where we see lower, longer-term retention outcomes as well. So for even, for those international students, they may be individuals who studied for 4 years, worked for a year, applied through the SINP, got their permanent residency perhaps 2 years later. And we are seeing that that's an area of the program where we have lower retention outcomes. Now, having said that, there's lots of reasons to try and improve that, their employment outcomes and their retention outcomes as well. And I would just say that any program or support or service that we offer at ICT would be available to them as well. We don't exclude based on residency status. And I would just contrast that to the federal government, who spends substantially more on settlement services in Saskatchewan. So they spend about $47 million every year on settlement services in Saskatchewan, but they don't provide service to any temporary resident, including international students. So that's another area that we're trying to make some progress on through various channels and FPT forums as well.
Thank you. I think we have less time. I have 2 questions. Just to quickly go with it, that Saskatchewan is, at this time of the year, if I'm looking, we are the most attractive place to attract people, not even from abroad, but inside the province as well. Our member from Lumsden Morris, he was talking the other day in the chamber, that real estate market, and it's true, it's back. If you buy a house in Ontario, in BC, in Alberta, you will see a big difference. Whatever you can buy for $1 million, you can get it over here for $400,000 very easily. If we have a living cost and if we have that affordability there, still people are draining out of our province. I'm not saying that we have control on people to stay here. There could be a lot of reason that they have to. But as far as I can see, the statistic in 5 years, 40% people ran down from the province. Where we are in good shape, we can retain. What is the best strategy we can use to make sure we can reduce this 40%? If I'm wrong, might be 30%, but at least we have to reduce that to 10% to make sure that we can keep that promise.
I appreciate that. No, and our objective, we'd love everybody to stay that came through, whether it be SIMP or federal stream and located here. You're right, though. I mean, the reality is that there's various reasons why people relocate, and that's fair. That's going to continue to happen. But what we can do, I think, to maximize the number of people that are staying here, it really is kind of around economic opportunity. I think that is really one of the most significant components to that. So, continuing to create jobs, create opportunity, having in place training programs or credential recognition programs to maximize credentials obtained elsewhere. I actually think this is going to be a competitive advantage we have on the credential recognition office and service, that once the message is out there, we've just kind of started advertising because we just started the office up, but the message will get out there that the easiest and best place to have a credential recognized in Canada is Saskatchewan, and I think that's going to really lead to a competitive advantage we have in that space for those who have a credential they've earned from elsewhere. There are other parts on kind of the program design element that we are looking at. I referenced a bit of that earlier, talking about the actual in-person recruitment with employers on the ground, with officials, where we're doing very rapid processing, an ability to actually do face-to-face discussions about what long-term settlement plans are, and making sure everybody has the information too. I mean, if somebody's in, Chandigarh or somebody's in Manila, they might not actually know all of the realities about it gets pretty cold here on occasion. And, we want to be transparent about that, though. And I think the way you can be transparent about that is having these face-to-face discussions and really getting a sense of that long-term intent to reside. So that's a part of it. I think that there are a number of things we've been exploring internally as well. We've got a pretty good sense of what leads to good settlement outcomes. Employers, I think, are getting more experience in this as well, because it is in their interest too. If they're providing, a job to a newcomer. It's in their interest that there's a long-term retention in that space as well. So I think employers are gaining more experience in understanding some of those elements too. I would be very confident in saying we are going to see an increasing retention rate. That is going to be the case. We're committed to that within the ministry, and I think we have, garnered some really positive insights into what is going to be indicative and what are the factors that go into a higher retention rate going forward. So we're committed to doing that, and I think we're going to see success there too.
Thank you, Minister. The last question that I have a lot of questions, but the last one with the time frame. I do understand that in past there were few breaches that happened to immigration data, and I think your office and yourself must have taken it very seriously. My question is, what is our plan in future so this thing should not happen?
Thank you for the question, and most certainly we do take that very seriously. And so at the time that it happened, it certainly wasn't something we would anticipate from within our own ministry. And so we've taken a number of actions specifically related to recommendations from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner around things that we can do in our ministry to ensure that that doesn't happen again. And I'm very pleased to report that, since that time, which has been more than 1 year, we have not had additional occurrences of privacy breaches, really based around how we can most effectively ensure that our colleagues within the Ministry of ICT understand the responsibilities and the consequences for misusing personal information that may be available in the ministry as a result of programs that require a high degree of personal information. We've also enhanced our training, used some of the technology tools that we have available. For example, in COVID, it was very easy for our team to process immigration applications from outside of our bricks and mortar structure. That is not something that we do anymore. It builds more of a collegial relationship, but also reduces the risk when it comes to access to personal information. And so I'm very proud of my colleagues who are in the room today and the work that they have done to ensure that we do not have another occurrence within the ministry.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Having reached our agreed-upon time for consideration of these estimates, we will now adjourn consideration of the estimates for the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training. Minister, if you have any closing remarks you could like to make.
Just thank the committee. Thank you very much for very good questions. It was a very good discussion here tonight. And of course, want to thank our team here at Immigration and Career Training, who do a great job, who are genuinely committed to the people of this province, I can tell you. And I feel privileged to work with. So thank you.
Mr. Berkey, if you have any closing remarks you'd like to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for all our office executive directors for preparing for that. Thank you for your professionalism. I will say that all the questions were very great questions, answers, and thank you for that. I appreciate to be here, and I was really nervous that my bill was sweating, but I think it went very well. Thank you very much for all the help. Thank you, Minister, Deputy Minister, and Directors. Thank you very much to be here today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. That concludes our business for this evening, and I would ask a member to move a motion of adjournment. Mr. Ottenbright so moves. All agreed? Carried. The committee stands adjourned until Wednesday, April 17th, 2024 at 3:30 p.m.